Good afternoon, and today we shall be talking another part of Freudian ideas and thought, and it will be an interesting part, of course, since Freud talks a lot of about our human behavior. Freud talks a lot about our human psychology, and he deals a lot about our human interactions, daily interactions. So this is Freud, another very significant text. This one is Psychopathology of Everyday Life. Now, Psychopathology of Everyday Life, the book was published in 1901. Sigmund Freud was very, in that sense, optimistic regarding the success of a book like this. And really, the book was a grand success that we found later on. Psychopathology of Everyday Life talks a lot about our everyday behavior, the way we communicate, the way we often forget, okay? The way we often, misspell certain words in our daily connections, interactions. So why do we misspell something? Why do we say something else than when we are supposed to say something that was in our brain? But at the right moment, at the right occasion, we often say something else that is totally different that we were planning to do ultimately. So why such things happen? Why do we do such kind of things? So Freud was very curious to know, to discuss, to decipher all these events which take place in daily interaction. Now, out of that long association, out of that long practice to observe the kind of habits that every individual has, this is actually the summation, the gist, the collection of those observations in our daily affairs. And the process of germination actually began for a long time, but ultimately it came out in a book format in 1901, and we came to know some of the brilliant ideas, and one of that very brilliant ideas of Freud that is available in this text is famously known as Freudian slips, SLIPS. Now, what is Freudian slips? These are certain mistakes that I was trying to say that we consciously or unconsciously, not at all consciously, rather we unconsciously utter certain words, certain phrase that is not actually planned to say at the time of the communication, at the time of our any presentation, or saying something in a particular program or daily communication. But such kind of mistakes, misspelling, slips that happen, even when we try to prevent not to have such kind of mistakes in our daily communication, but it happens. And records show that we every day misspell, we do such kind of mistakes unknowingly so many times. It is not an innocent kind of mistake that Freud would like to say. This is not something that happens without any specific reason. Rather, Freud would like to say, for such kind of mistakes, for such kind of mispronunciation, such kind of misselection of any particular, glossary, vocabulary in our daily communication, it has a deep-rooted psychic problem or something that some psychological, problems are going on, or something that we are thinking a different one and we are saying something different. So This is a very severe psychic problem that is very much there. And if it is analyzed very skilled manner, then probably we can analyze the personality of that individual, or the kind of mental and the physical and the psychological state the person is undergoing at that very moment. That can be identified very soon. So this is all about, actually, we shall be discussing today our topic, Freudian slips and parapraxis. Parapraxis is almost very clear to understand that primarily talks about some of the not getting the exact word, okay? At the time of communication, we don't get often the exact word that we really need to have, that we are really need to place in a particular, sharing the words, sharing the ideas and observations. Rather, we substitute something else. What exactly was required, we don't find that exact word. Rather, we substitute it with another one. So this not finding word at the time of communication, that is a very common event, and there is nothing wrong actually, but it talks a lot, once again, according to Freud, our psychical, our mental, psychological patterns, conditions, and situations. Okay, so this is all about that. Freud was actually, he was, long observation, long practice as a psychiatrist. He was witnessing so many such conditions that happen in our daily life, in our everyday connection. Now, Jacques Lacan, the famous Lacan, he was also very fond of this particular book written by Sigmund Freud. And the name of the book is The Psychopathology of Everyday Life. And according to Lacan, if one needs to know what is the unconscious being operated in the mind of an individual, one probably should read a book like this, The Psychopathology of Everyday Life. Now, along with the famous theory of dream that came in 1900, the interpretation of dreams, and at the same time, another one that came in 1905, jokes and their relation to the unconscious. Now, every day we share so many jokes. Now, the level of jokes that we share with our friends, our colleagues, our kids, our family members, they often vary. You immediately can recognize the kind of joke you share with your family members, the joke you share with your near and dear ones are not same in all occasion, in all conditions, in all kind of people. It often vary man to man. It often vary as you are about to share such kind of jokes. Now, jokes also, your selection of jokes, your selection of choice of subject, the kind of joke you crack every day, it talks a lot about human psychology at the same time. It talks a lot about the unconscious being operated in your brain, about which you are not serious right at this moment, but at the same time, it is something that can easily be identified. Now, talking all those issues, interpretation of dreams and the jokes and the other relation to the unconscious, we all know that it was Lacan's favorite, and Lacan also recommended to read Psychopathology of Everyday Life. Now, Psychopathology of Everyday Life is no doubt of much great importance. Now, how did it happen? It happened in Freud's own life too. It happened in Freud's own experiences too. And Freud himself shared so many times some of the real life problem that he faced. Now, when we are talking about the parapraxis, we are to mention some of the real life experience that Freud actually identified in his own case. Now, it was that famous Signorelli, the painter, and it was in the place called Orevito Fresco. In Orevito Fresco's painter, Signorelli, the name, of course, was very famous, but somehow, when the name was to be remembered by Sigmund Freud, he couldn't remember the name of that famous painter, Signorelli. Instead, what did he do? He did remember, tried to remember, or rather, that I was trying to say that in that case, what we do, we substitute that empty space at the time of processing of remembering something. So that empty space was actually substituted by two other painters. One is Botticelli, another one is Boltraffio. Now, this process of substitution that we don't remember in a particular event, in a particular occasion, rather we substitute the moment with some other name. This is called parapraxis, and it really happened in the case of Sigmund Freud himself, and he had such occasions so many times. Now, Freud is saying that it happens with a particular process, and the name of the process is called associative processes. This is called theory of association. And I'm sure that we all know it well that we can't remember all the things in all the occasions. We remember something, for example, that the long list of Mughal monarchs, okay? It can be remembered with a particular rhyme system or with some other association. So anything that is difficult, we often try to associate it with something else. And that association is so brilliantly connected that whenever we try to remember one and we take help of the other, and the series of names, the apparently difficult names for my brain, it comes automatically. So it happened in the case of Sigmund Freud, and this is something that is very interesting, that is very common. Now, so many chapters are there in this famous book, Psychopathology of Everyday Life. But I would like to mention only a few, because it's not a space to discuss in detail about the psychopathology of everyday life. But it is necessary to give some hints, to give some references that can help us, that can enkindle us, that can encourage us to read later in an elaborate way on this particular event. Now, when in chapter 1 of this famous book, we find the name of the chapter, Forgetting. And forgetting is a kind of a very common practice of every individual. And there is hardly any person found who hasn't experienced that particular event called forgetting yet. Rather, it is a very common thing, common habit, common problem that we so many times forget. Often such kind of things happen that while wearing the spectacle, we search on the wardrobe, we search on the particular table that where is my spectacle? But it is something that is on my eyes. I am already have owned the spectacle. But this is a very common thing. This is such kind of forgetting is very, very common practice. Now, while talking about forgetting the proper names, in the first chapter of this Psychopathology of Everyday Life, Freud talks about forgetting of the proper names. Now, Freud is saying that he started writing about forgetting with a particular essay. And the name of the essay was On the Psychic Mechanism of Forgetfulness. So we often forget, and so many brilliant writers, thinkers, philosophers, and so many different kind of men of wisdom are often seen. They are very forgetful, and so many stories are there with Einstein and with Newton that how much forgetful they were. And in their works, they are so obsessed that they are often oblivious of what is happening around them. So, forgetfulness is something that is a very common human practice. Now, Freud is going to say that, this is a kind of a psychological process. Now, we often forget proper names. We don't remember the exact proper name often. So why is it so? Why is it something that such kind of proper names we forget? And now ultimately, what is the conclusion of Sigmund Freud with long observations on that issue is that it happens only because of the failure of psychic function. Memory often doesn't work. Memory cannot recollect immediately. Memory is not preserved in a perfect manner, and it happens only because there is a failure of psychic function. And it is a kind of a phenomenon that is very common that, we experience in our all occasions. So when we forget, at the same time, Freud is saying another thing happens. It is called false recollection. False recollection, we try to recollect something, but that recollection actually doesn't work. Since that recollection is actually of no use, it is called false recollection. So it is very common. When one person forgets one thing, he or she immediately goes for a recollection. And that recollection either may be successful one, or it may not be successful one immediately. And in that case, it will be a false recollection improper. Now, while talking of false recollection, automatically comes that another very significant thing, and this one is called the substitutive names. We place that empty space with such names that works as substitutions. And this is something, that happens all the occasions. Now, Freud is going to say when such kind of things happen, now certain, at the time of faulty recollection, certain conditions happen in our psychic status. What are basically he is talking about three different kind of psychic conditions. Number one is a certain disposition to forget the same. We often forget. It may be we are in a hurry. It may be we are overburdened. It may be we are not mentally, physically, or up to that particular way conscious. So certain disposition to forget the same. So it happens. Forgetfulness, it happens. And the next important thing that he is mentioning in the text is the process of suppression. So this is interesting. We often forget because we want to forget. Okay? We often forget because we think that if we forget that particular event or the occasion, then it will be helpful for us to evade certain difficult conditions. It will be helpful for us to avoid certain problematic areas. So naturally, to avoid certain conditions, certain situations, so it's a process of suppression. Our mind unconsciously works in such a way we want to forget. I do remember one essay, a very popular essay, and it was on forgetting by Robert Lynn. And Lynn was saying that, we often forget, okay? And we forget only those things that we want to forget. And that very classic essay, interesting, informative, and very readable essay. Uh, this essay gives a lot of references, references of forgetting, and reference of that famous Uncle Pooja, who sitting on the newspaper now search for the newspaper everywhere, and who threats every member of the family that they are not at all sincere to keep the things in order. But even when Mr. Pojar is already seated on that particular newspaper, and he now searches for it. And I do remember in the essay Forgetfulness, there was a very beautiful reference in that particular essay by Robert Lind, that it is very common practice that when footballers, cricketers, they go to the field, and they, after winning the particular match with the opponents, they are so much obsessed with their performance during the game, they forget to take so many of their equipments, and they leave those equipments on the field. It is a very common habit that we find at the time, at the occasion of forgetfulness. Now, we often forget. We often forget, those issues, serious conditions, or such kind of events that is very problematic, putting some pressure in our brain. Our brain is not enjoying such kind of a data, and the data gets removed, and we forget. But suppose you are invited on the occasion of your friend's birthday, and it is going to be held after 2 weeks on a particular Sunday. So you are not immediately going to forget such kind of event, or a marriage party's invitation, or a very picnic's invitation. So in such cases, we generally, because it is something that can give us space, a space for enjoyment, a space for, association with new people. It will be something very entertaining. It will be something that we must enjoy throughout the day. So naturally, what happens in such cases, we don't forget. We don't forget invitations generally. Invitation that is in which the feast is basically connected to. So forgetting is a very interesting kind of event. Chapter 2 of the text is also there, in which Sigmund Freud talks about, forgetting of foreign words. The name of the second chapter is Forgetting of Foreign Words. We often forget foreign words. In the dictionary, you often have encountered at the end of the glossary, at the end of the appendix, some list of foreign words are there. Only a handful we can remember, but the most of the foreign words that we don't remember, even when we practice them on regular basis, we try to mug them up in our brain, but still we cannot remember them all. Why is it so? Now, Freud is also talking a lot about such kind of forgetting the foreign words. Now, forgetting the foreign words is something that is, according to Freud, if I come to the conclusion directly, Freud is there referring to that it happens only because we get fatigued remembering such kind of foreign words, and our brain doesn't enjoy at all. We often try to remember, or we often try to recollect those foreign words only because of, those words are often practiced in case of, law, in case of other technical conditions, in court, and in some other places. But those in political background, such words are often used. But our brain gets fatigued. Our brain don't enjoy. Since our brain gets fatigued and the brain doesn't enjoy at all such kind of words and vocabulary, they gradually forget. So it is clear that if anything that is very charming for your brain, if anything that is very interesting for your brain, you don't forget immediately. Rather, it gets cemented, it gets fixed in the brain for long. Now, I will conclude this very, very, very brief discussion about psychopathology of everyday life, referring to some of the reference of Freudian sleep. Freudian sleep is something, a kind of that mistakes, okay? It's a kind of some of the, unintentional conditions that we say one word instead of the other. Now, Freud is not a kind of a person to let it go very easily. Rather, when such mistakes happen, Freud is finding there some very meaningful associations, meaningful occasions, because such kind of mistakes, they don't happen all on a sudden. According to Freud, those are the events through which we can reveal the secret of the thoughts, and we can reveal the secrets of the human feelings that the person is actually undergoing right at that moment. If you try to, dissect the kind of sleeps, the kind of mistakes the man is, he's doing every time he communicates, or occasionally such kind of things happen. So this kind of blunders can directly or indirectly refer to certain human behavior. Now, these are, according to Freud, results of disturbing influence of something outside of the intended speech. Now, it is those unconscious belief system, unconscious wish, again, fulfillment or not being fulfilled desires. Someone is trying to get fulfilled in certain conditions, and when those conditions are not fulfilled properly, such kind of blunders take place, and such blunders are very common. So it's all about the mistakes of Freudian sleep. Now, Freud himself is referring to an individual, and this individual was a very young man and who often misquoted Latin phrases from the famous text, the Aeneid. So it is very interesting that Freud is himself saying, and that person who was known to Sigmund Freud, and he misquoted quotations and phrases from Latin, the Aeneid. The young man often was found to drop important words and phrases while quoting lines from the Aeneid. Freud is trying to discover some of the hidden secrets lying inside. What exactly is there? And he is obviously of the opinion that there must be some serious psychological questions working underneath, for which such sort of this kind of mistakes are taking place. And Freud is very much determined to say that probably in such case, the young man probably is, worried of blood, the kind of mistakes the man actually was doing. He was probably worried of blood and the kind of pregnancy scare the man probably experienced with his girlfriend. So his use of misquoted phrase can refer to such kind of hidden secrets, such kind of, unwanted experiences that the man is going through. So there is no problem to understand at all that in most of the cases, Freudian sleeps, misquotations, mistakes, and blunders, these are nothing but the unconscious events and the suppressed thoughts. And these suppressed thoughts are the daily events and phenomenon. We also would like to mention that such things happen almost if an individual uses almost 1,000 words, so one or two errors out of 1,000 words are very common. And in average, one individual can make around 22 such kind of verbal slips every day on average. It may go, the number may change. And very interesting example, suppose the biology teacher is teaching in the classroom, and while using the word organism, mistakenly he uses orgasm. So it is a kind of a Freudian slip, an example of Freudian slip. The man, instead of organism, has used the word orgasm, talks a lot about that individual's psychological state and that particular condition in which he is passing through. One very interesting example can be made while talking of Freudian slip, with which we would like to end today's class. And this one is, suppose someone is meeting another person, and when it is very natural to say, glad to meet you, but the man is not very happy inwardly, and he is bound by custom, by culture, or it's a very common habit to say, glad to meet you. So then it happens all on a sudden without any, prior reference to that individual. It comes out from his own brain, sad to meet you. So the glad becomes sad. Now, no one never, uttered such kind of a sentence, sad to meet you. But when such kind of a mistake happens, so this mistakes immediately helps to imagine the condition of that individual, that this individual probably is in a crisis or is not happy to meet the individual. So this is how in our daily, everyday communication, very interesting things happen. So that was our talk today. That was in brief. We actually wanted to highlight some of the very basic elements regarding psychopathology of everyday life. Thank you so much for your patient listening.